Good evening, everyone. My name is Stacey Marville, and I am one of the school counselors here at Annandale High School. This evening, we have a college admissions panel, and we have three representatives from James Madison University. We have Jamie Didawick. From George Mason University, we have Carla Goodwin. And from Radford University, we have Guadalupe Sanchez. We thank you for taking the time out to meet with us this evening. The format for this evening's presentation is that I will ask each college admissions representative a few questions. If you think of some questions during the presentation, please post them in the chat, and then we will answer them at the end of the presentation. All right, panel, thank you for joining us this evening. Our first question is, what opportunities, programs, and/or clubs does your school offer for first-generation, low-income students and its minority population?
I can kick us off. Hi, everyone. Seniors, I just want to give you a quick shout out and tell you how proud I am of you all making it this far. And it's been a wild ride. We know that. So let's see, JMU's got a few specific programs for students. We've got our Center for Multicultural Student Services, which is kind of the umbrella organization for a lot of our minority and diversity organizations. We've got Students for Minority Outreach. We've got LSA, which is very big, the Latino Student Association. And I really want to highlight one of our scholarship programs that's geared towards first generation and low income students. It is a full ride to JMU. It's called the Centennial Scholars Program. And I mentioned earlier, I'd love to have one of my Adams be one of our Centennial Scholars this year. So I highly recommend applying for it. Students that are high need, but also high achieving within their high school.
I can definitely go next. Hi, everyone. My name is Guadalupe, and I'm with Radford. And right now, our first-gen population for the university is 30%. So 30% of our population are first-gen students, the first in their families to attend a four-year institution. So that's definitely something that we are very proud of at Radford. And I would say in terms of resources and additional support, we also have the Center for Diversity and Inclusion at our campus. And they're kind of like that hub of that organizes all of the different clubs on campus that are specific to minority groups within the university, as well as the LGBTQ+ community on campus. And it's kind of that safe space for students where you can go, feel like you have that safe space to be a part of, feel included in all of the different multicultural events that we have going on campus. So there's definitely lots of support for you to engage in within the Radford community in general.
Hello, everyone. Very excited to be here. So at George Mason, we have been designated as a first gen forward institution. So that's an institution that has a commitment to improving the experiences and outcomes of first generation students. So a lot of our initiatives are spearheaded by our Center for Culture, Equity, and Empowerment. So essentially within that, we have our First Gen Plus Center that hosts the STEP program. So that's the Student Transition Empowerment Program, specifically for students that are first generation students. So the summer before your first year at Mason, you take a 3-credit class with the cohort of incoming students that are first gen, and that really helps you with your transition to college to make sure you're making connections both with students, faculty, and staff on campus. And then during the academic year, that transitions into a University 100 class. That is 1 credit that encourages that continuing of learning for study skills or any other assistance that you might need. And that is separate from our first gen peer mentorship program. So that is where you can find an upperclassman on campus to be your mentor, or you can register yourself to be a mentee to get that support and that you're able to make friends and build those connections early on.
Great, thank you so much. Our next question is in relation to grades and their grading policy. Given FCPS grading changes this past year, how does your college view P grades and NM or no marks, which are not factored into GPA or into the GPA?
Go. So we do not look at GPA at JMU. What we're looking for is your final grades in your core classes. And what we're looking for is mostly A's and B's for final grades. So while I'll be honest, I would rather see the grade than a P grade. We also know that COVID completely rocked everyone's world, and you were virtual at FCPS till at least March, potentially the whole year. So what I would prefer students do is, if you did list a P grade or two, I think you had up to 2, correct, Ms. Marville? You
Correct.
can choose. And so if you chose to take a P grade and we see the history prior to that, say you had a C in Algebra 1, a C in Geometry, and then a P in Algebra 2, you know, my inclination is going to say it's probably not an A or a B, that might be a lower grade because they took a P. If you would provide me and all of us actually some context as to why you chose that pass grade as opposed to a regular grade, that can only help. It really can say, you know, being homebound really affected my grades. I didn't have a place to do my homework. I didn't have a safe space to do what I needed to do. That context can make a world of difference for us.
And just know that we went through the pandemic just alongside of each one of you. So we understand that this was a difficult year for all students. So if there are some pass, no pass grades on there, you know, we are definitely going to look at that full holistic, you know, overview of your application. So we're going to look at everything that you submit. So don't stress out too much about, you know, that pass, no pass class. It's really going to be just a tiny factor in your admissions decision, because we do look at the history of your previous grades. We look at trends. We look at rigorous courses that you've taken. So all of those different things will play a factor, as well as everything else that you submit to our office. But yes, the more information that you give us, the more context you give us on your specific situation, helps us make a more accurate decision on your application.
I certainly agree with everything my 2 colleagues have said, and I do want to kind of reassure those students that if we read your application and you might be seen as being a borderline student of being accepted, what we will do is request your senior year grades, which might not be on a pass-fail scale. So that contributes to the context and that holistic review about upward trends potentially that Guadalupe was just talking about, because it might show some improvement, or you might have some tangible grades that we can look at during your senior year, which will help contribute to that holistic review.
Thank you so much, panel. The next question is regards to grades as well, or actually more so the application process. Panel, what do you view as being one of the most important parts of the application process? Is there more weight being placed on transcripts, test scores, or letters of recommendation?
Yeah, when it comes to us reviewing your application, I think what's going to have the highest or largest amount of weight will always be your transcript, because that can tell us so much about you as a student. It can tell us about, you know, the classes you've taken, your trends, if you've improved significantly since freshman year. Those are things we like to see. Or maybe you started off strongly, you know, your freshman year, and then, you know, your sophomore year and your junior year, you may not have done so well. Those are things that we don't like to see, obviously. But if there's a specific reason why maybe your grades weren't so great for a specific year, maybe it was COVID related, or maybe you had other personal reasons that may have affected your grades, feel free to let us know about those specific circumstances, because we definitely do take that into consideration when we review your application. But it is going to be a full review of your application. So it's not just solely what we see on your transcript, but it'll also be everything else that you let us see as part of your application process. So, you know, your personal statement, any extracurricular involvement that you include, letters of recommendation, you know, those things are also things that will play a factor in our decision making.
I would just add to that, when you have a lot of application components, especially those that are optional, when we say optional, we truly mean it is. So if you choose not to submit them, it won't work against you, but submitting them might also work in your favor, in the sense of it helps us get to know more about you as a student, both inside and outside the classroom. So despite the application materials perhaps being optional, they are highly encouraged. because then you're kind of giving us more information about yourself and then more things that we can consider as a part of your application. So it is important to be mindful. The less you submit, the more that those materials might hold some weight. So of course, the academic transcript will always remain supreme, but everything else kind of contributes to that picture that you paint about yourself on your app.
Okay. The next question is regarding the pandemic. Given that we are in a pandemic, students have missed out on some opportunities to participate in sports and other curricular activities. How does your university or college view students who have not had the opportunity to, let's say, participate in activities or in sports over the last year and a half?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, Ms. Marville, because all colleges will agree with this statement, is we do not want you to risk your health or your family's health or put yourself in any sort of unsafe or any kind of situation where you're not comfortable for an extracurricular activity. And you need to think about it this way: extracurricular activities live up to their name of extra. That is not the main component, like Guadalupe said, about your application process. It really comes down a lot to your academics. Those are a supplemental part of your application. And you may have nothing this year, and that's okay. It really is. We get it. And you have my blessing to put down, I was accepted to an internship and I obviously couldn't go, but I had been awarded this or things like that you were planning to do. You may want to put some of that down. But it's so, so important to really focus on those things that are most meaningful. If you have a part-time job, that's an incredible extracurricular activity. If you are the caretaker of your younger siblings, extra kudos to you. That's a big deal. And we want you to put those things on your application too. So even prior to COVID, I've been saying this for so long that, you could be a 3-sport athlete and be an Eagle Scout or a Girl Scout Gold Award winner, or, a captain of the football team. None of those things are going to take the place of poor academics, at least for JMU's standpoint. So you've got to make sure to find that balance. And some additional advice too, I've been sharing this last week or so, is if the night before you're going to, a sport club or something, and you're going, oh, I don't want to go to that, or if you're just feeling kind of down about something, kind of do some soul searching. Why are you in that activity? That one thing, I promise you, is not going to be your golden ticket to that university. So it's time to really scale back and find that balance between what is the most meaningful thing to you. It might just be one thing. That's okay. It really is. So you've got so many things pulling at you: your friends, your family, your mental health, your academics, and more. And so it's really, you have all of our blessings to really kind of say, like, okay, these are the most important things to me, and that's what I'm going to focus on.
Okay, next question. What supports or resources has your institution implemented for students as a result of the COVID pandemic?
The most major support that we provided to students was financial support by means of the CARES Act. So that was money awarded to institutions via the government. So the Office of Financial Aid essentially worked with students that expressed that they were experiencing financial hardships directly as a result of the pandemic, and were able to award them some additional funding to go towards academics or other things that might be needed. And then outside of that, we always do have support services on campus, but when the pandemic was at its peak and a lot of people transitioned to taking classes virtually or living off campus, what we did was made it very apparent that those support services were still available to students in a virtual capacity. So CAPS, which is Counseling and Psychological Services, was doing virtual appointments with students. You were still able to work with different organizations, even for physical well-being. So we have Burn Along, which is an app with home workouts on it available to all students. So just making it very apparent that we were still working with students and still able to support students, even if we all were at home.
Anyone else from the panel care to share? Okay.
Yeah, Carla covered a great amount of stuff too. That's awesome.
Okay, great. What advice would you give to juniors and seniors this year?
I would say enjoy the process. The college application process is a lot of fun, but it can be stressful, especially if you're a first generation student and you don't really know how to navigate the process. Know that you do have support. You have support in your high school with your school counselors, in the career center, and then you also have support on the college side. So for example, I'm your admissions counselor for Radford University, and I would love to hear from each one of you about your interests, what you're interested in majoring in, and what makes you excited to go to a four-year university and pursue higher education. So reach out to us. We are here to guide you through that process, whether you're going through the application process or applying for financial aid. All of those different things are things that we can definitely give you guidance on. So don't be afraid to ask questions and reach out. Don't be shy. We are very friendly people, us that work in the admissions world. So we want to hear from you all. You make our jobs a lot of fun when we actually get to hear from you. So don't be afraid to come to us for any guidance or support.
And Guadalupe mentioned it earlier, and Carla dropped a really great link in there of taking advantage of all the virtual options that you have available to you. Your friends that are 2 years older than you may not have gone through a pandemic, but they had 0 virtual tours available to them, and all these amazing resources that colleges have had to kind of come up with in a really fast timeline, but now these are staying and they're not going away. And so you all really have this like treasure trove of information. JMU has videos on our website of, information sessions from all the different academic majors. That's not something we did 2 years ago. And this is a huge thing for our students too. But I'd also say this is much easier said than done, but try not to stress as much as you can. It is terrible and overwhelming and very anxiety inducing at times. And we know that. So yes, do reach out to us because we can help you. Your school counselors at Annandale are a phenomenal group of counselors that know so much, and they can reach out and they can help you with things that you need too. So I told a student earlier, the only thing you have control over right now as a senior is your senior year grades, really. So just focus on your academics, keep that momentum carried through into your freshman year.
I would say seniors, if you can, apply to some schools early action or just early in general, because it helps you divide up that workload a little bit. So think about it as if you apply to some schools early action or early, and then you apply to some schools regular decision, you're dividing up that workload. So you're not applying to all those schools at once. So it helps alleviate some of that stress, but also it's just quite frankly a great confidence booster, because if you apply early action or early, you might get your decision around December or early January. So when you are applying to schools that have those later deadlines, you already have some acceptances in your back pocket. So you're able to go through those applications knowing that you can do this. And then for juniors and seniors, I always say communication is key. Communicate with those that are in your life, whether it's your teachers, counselors, people at home that might be supporting you, because they want to be involved in your process and they do want to help you. So you want to share the times that you might be struggling or stressed out and see how they can be a resource to you. But also you want to share your successes with those people because they do want to genuinely celebrate with you, and they have helped you along the way. And I know that they would be happy to hear about those great moments as well.
Thank you, panel. Do you anticipate any admissions changes for this fall?
Probably no major changes on our end. Even last year when we had a couple hundred deferred students, it really did not shift the admissions process much. So the only big change we've got is last year we had extended our deadlines 2 weeks. So this year we are back to our normal deadlines of November 1st is non-binding early action, and January 15th is regular decision.
Go ahead, Carla.
I was just going to say our deadlines are a little different. So early action is still November 1st, but regular decision, instead of January 15th, it is now February 1st.
And for us at Radford, we don't have a set deadline since we're rolling admission. So if you apply early, you'll find out if you've been admitted to the university early. So definitely submit your application early, since we also do have a pretty quick turnaround time to get you your decision. If you apply today, you'll hear back within 2 weeks. So the sooner you apply, the sooner you'll know.
Thank you. What I would like to do right now, since we only have a few minutes left in our session, is open it up to the audience. If you have any questions that you would like answered by the panel, please type it in the chat. I do have one question, panel, that was brought up the last session, and I felt that you guys provided some very good information. What about scholarships?
Yeah, most universities will have 2 different types of scholarship opportunities: merit-based scholarships and then need-based scholarships based on FAFSA. So usually when students submit their admissions application to universities, they are considered for merit-based scholarship opportunities, but it is important to check with those specific universities that you're applying to. Some may have additional applications for merit, but for us at Radford, as long as you're submitting that admissions application, you will be considered for merit scholarship opportunities. And then the second way to be considered for scholarships would be by submitting a FAFSA application. So the FAFSA opens up on October 1st of this year. So we do ask that you submit that FAFSA application to be considered for financial aid. And then once you submit that, our financial aid departments can work on creating a financial aid package for you that can consist of grants and scholarships, work study jobs on campus, as well as federal loans. So the only way to be considered for all those things is by submitting that FAFSA application. And then the sooner you submit that, the better as well, because I usually tend to tell my students, think of FAFSA funds as like a big pile of money. And if you apply early on, guess what? You do have access to more of those funds versus students that are going to apply later on in the school year. They get basically whatever's left over. So you want to be one of those first applicants that submits the FAFSA application. And most universities also do have priority deadlines of when they would like to have your FAFSA application submitted by. So for us, that date is February 1st, but don't wait until that date to submit your FAFSA. If you can submit it in October, that's what I would do.
Yeah, I put a couple of links in the chat. JMU has a scholarship hub, which is a one-stop location that lists all of our scholarships. Most schools have something called a net price calculator on their financial aid website, and that can help. And it's a pretty good estimate of how much that university is going to cost for you. You just put in a little bit of information, you'll get a good estimate there. And then just a reminder that FAFSA is free. That first F stands for the free application for federal student aid. There are some scam sites out there. So I put the direct link for the FAFSA website, and it's fafsa.gov.
Yeah, so as they both said, certainly federal financial aid is a route, merit-based scholarship. So if you apply to Mason by November 1st, you're automatically considered for merit-based scholarships without an additional application. But I also want to shamelessly plug scholarships that are not connected to a specific university at all. There are a lot of scholarships out there. So I would ask your counselors about some scholarships, but also there are a lot of websites online such as CAPEX, so that's CAPPEX, and I can put that link in there in a second, but it's basically, you can fill out some criteria and see if you're eligible, but there is money everywhere. So I would say apply to colleges first, get those acceptances. And then once you have those acceptances and you're done with that process, that's when a lot of the scholarship deadlines come up. So applications are not quite done yet, a lot to go through senior year, but it is worth it because that is free money. It goes towards your tuition. It can go towards books or other costs along the way. So you want to give it your best shot.
Thank you so much, panel. It looks like we have a question from Michelle, and she would like to know, does she have to take the SAT to get into George Mason University or any other Virginia colleges?
Yeah, so a lot of schools, especially with the pandemic, are score optional. So George Mason is right along with that list. You do not have to take the SAT or the ACT in order to be admitted. If you do not submit those scores, it does not count against you. But at Mason, I always say, if you have taken the time to sit down for those exams, we want your time to be well spent. So send in your scores anyways and allow us as admissions professionals to decide if you're a better applicant with the scores or as a score optional. We are admissions counselors, not admissions rejectors. We want you to get admitted. So send in those scores and then we'll make that decision for you.
For us, I will say it actually really doesn't make a difference for JMU. So you can totally skip sending it to JMU. We were test optional pre-pandemic. And I will say that is one area that truly does not make a difference for us in the review.
Yeah, for us at Radford, we were also test optional before the pandemic. So don't worry about submitting that SAT or ACT test score for both admissions or scholarship consideration.
Thank you so much, panel. If possible, could you put your contact information in the chat so that students and parents who are participating in this session have your contact information? Thank you so much. We only have time for one more question. So if anyone else has a last minute question that they would like answered, please type it in the chat. Well, actually, ladies, I do have a question because I am a parent of a senior this year. So my question for you would be, are there any, how do you guys get freshmen acclimated to their first year on campus? Are there any special clubs or programs that you may implement at your school? I do know that there are some schools that have curfews for freshmen. So are there anything that you do to help get your students ready or any programs for their first year?
Yeah, that is one of my favorite things. One of my favorite traditions, we call it JMU, is our orientation program. It's 5 days, morning till late in the evening before classes even start. And it's specifically designed to combat homesickness, help you learn the lay of the land, learn campus. You know, we have, 350 fresh volunteer upperclassmen guides that are their mentors throughout this whole process. There's programming activities, and you all probably have something similar too, where we've had, you know, all sorts of ethical discussions. We've had fun, you know, pep rallies and things like that. And that is such an important part of the orientation process into freshman year, because it really does feed into retention and helping you feel like your college is your second home. As much as a parent, you don't want them to start calling it home, but it does make it feel like a home away from home for you.
Thank you, Jamie. So it looks like we only, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Carla. I
was only going to say, as it is temporarily your home, a lot of institutions have learning communities in the residence halls. So some institutions make it optional, some it's required, but essentially that's your very first year in the residence hall. You're on a floor with students where you at least share one common interest. So at George Mason, for example, it's based on either your major. So if you're an engineering major, there's one for engineering students. It's based on identity. So there's one for LGBTQ students, or it's based on interest. So there's one, for example, if you like outdoors and recreation, it's a group that they go hiking and they go on trails all throughout the Virginia area. So you're in the residence halls, and that's a great way to make friends with not only your roommates, but other people on your floor.
Great.
I don't know if I have time to add anything.
Go ahead.
Okay, real quickly, we have this really great 1-credit course called University 100, and it's required for all of our freshman students to take. And it's a great class for you just to have a peer instructor that will work with you your first semester so that you don't feel like you're starting this journey off on your own. And you also get a peer student mentor that will also work with you so that you kind of do have that additional support. But the things that they cover within that class are just time management skills, study habits, and just a bunch of tips to be successful that freshman year.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Sanchez. I would like to thank the panel for taking the time out this evening to spend with us and answer very important questions about the college application process and just getting prepared. So I want to thank you ladies so much for participating in our panel. We really appreciate it. We hope you have a safe trip back home for those of you who traveled. So thank you again so much for participating. We really appreciate it. So thank you so much. And we're going to all go back to the main room.